Joining us now here is former federal judge Shira Shenlin, criminal defense attorney Arthur Aidala, and CNN anchor and chief legal analyst Laura Coates, who's been at the courthouse throughout this trial. Laura, the split verdict, what do you make of it?
You know what, I have to tell you that not just hindsight, but the way the presentation of evidence came in, I am not stunned that they were unable to make a full case with respect to RICO, a notoriously complex case that's usually associated with the mob, and also made the jurors actually consider a series of mini trials for each of the predicate acts, whether it's kidnapping or arson or bribery and the like. And that complexity, I think, played a role in it having a hung jury yesterday and today a resolution that I think shocked the fact you go from a hung jury to now an acquittal. But the most serious charges are now off the table, and what remains are including those prostitution-related charges. It's surprising for many given the testimony, overwhelmingly emotional, at times extremely compelling, from not only Cassie Ventura, who was the recipient of that savage assault in that Intercontinental video, or Jane, a pseudonym person who described her own trauma, that the jury was unconvinced, even when the prosecution said you only need to find one instance of sex trafficking for either of these two victims to have this person convicted, and they were on the stand for days. We heard about years-long relationships. They weren't convinced for a single one.
Arthur, what do you think was the crucial part of this case for the defense?
Well, the cross-examination of Cassie and of Jane as they went, I mean, obviously those are pivotal parts, right? They have really all of the powerful evidence. That's Cassie in the video. I just spoke to her attorney, Doug Wigdor. You know, as upset as they are about the verdict, we shouldn't forget that her civil case is kind of what led to this criminal case. So Wigdor bringing the civil case is what got the U.S. attorney excited to bring the criminal case. She did walk home with $30 million. But overall, Anderson, I think it was the technology, the emails and the text messaging where they're consenting about these freak-offs. They're consenting to do these things. That's evidence that you can't cross-examine, and the government can't fix those texts and emails from the alleged victims saying that they want to be participants in these actions.
Judge, do you agree with that those texts were important?
I do, absolutely. I think consent was the big issue here. I think the jury was obviously troubled by that. And remember, in criminal cases, it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And there certainly would have been a reasonable doubt on that consent issue.
And Laura, you talked about this before, but there were alleged co-conspirators who were not called. Do you think that impacted things?
Absolutely. It was one of the big questions, and it even came up during the closing arguments and the rebuttal piece because it was kind of the big giant elephant in the room. They had named alleged co-conspirators, two people, one of whom was Christina Karam, who is the right-hand woman of Sean Combs, who has denied any wrongdoing, has not been charged with the crime. Similarly, D-Rock as well, the security guard. And they were one of the witnesses that were never called. In fact, the jury heard from those who had been called, who were also receiving immunity. It must have in their minds been wondering, why am I not hearing from these people? Of course, you can charge someone with conspiracy, even if it's just one defendant. Need not actually charge everyone in that indictment, but that's a huge one. And they tried to clean it up in the prosecution by saying, yeah, we didn't call them, but you know what? They were equally available to all of us, and they could have called them. Well, the government has the burden of proving Diddy's guilt. He does not have the burden of proving his own innocence at all.
Judge, were you surprised that bail was denied?
Sorry?
That bail was denied?
Oh, no, I'm not surprised that bail was denied because the judge heard all of this evidence in this case. And the evidence showed a lot of bad acts. Whether the jury bought it or not is a different issue.
And the judge is allowed to take that into consideration.
Oh, sure. The judge heard about drugs. The judge heard about guns. The judge heard about a lot of arson. Thank you. The judge heard a lot of bad things. And the judge said, this is a violent person, and you're allowed to consider that because you talk about the safety of witnesses and the safety of the community when you decide bail issues. So there's two things you consider. Is this person going to return to court? Yeah, I think he would have. But is he dangerous out there? Maybe. Maybe he would have threatened these women.
And following up on that, Anderson, all of those same factors the judge is allowed to consider in sentencing.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, you know, no one's going to disagree with Mark Agnifilo. Today's a great day for Sean Combs. He avoids life in prison. He avoids a mandatory minimum of 15 years. However, The judge, everything he heard at that trial, he's allowed to take.
What's the maximum?
20 years. He could get
10 years for each count.
10 on each one to run consecutively.
So that's the point. To run consecutively, which is very, very rare. Mostly sentences on different counts run concurrently, which means if you give somebody 10 years, it's 10 years.
So 10 years would be probably the maximum.
Yeah,
Probably.
I don't think.
Do you have a sense of what do you think is likely?
You know, that's the $64,000 question.
Is it totally
as
up to
they
the
say.
judge?
Totally up to the judge. Absolutely. That judge will be thinking about this, I'm sure, right till the date of sentence.
But the guidelines come into play as well. I mean,
but he's not bound.
Right. He's a category. Right. That's an important point. He's a category 1, they say, in terms of no prior acts. But the judge has discretion entirely on this case.
Absolutely. There are something called federal sentencing guidelines. When I was there, they were mandatory. Then they became not mandatory. At that point, you can do whatever you want. You have full discretion.
So, Anderson, what happens is the prosecution is going to put together like a "This Is Your Life," Sean Combs, all the positive things. The defense is going to do that. The prosecution is going to make him sound like the worst guy ever walked the planet Earth. But then there's the Department of Probation, who's supposed to be objective, and they're going to give a recommendation to the judge based on other crimes or based on similar acts, even nationally, what people under those crimes would get sentenced to. But the judge is allowed to say, the way he did today, hey, Mr. Defense Attorney, you owned his violence in your summation, and therefore I'm not letting him out. And there's specific deterrence in the sentencing to make sure Combs doesn't do this again, but there's general deterrence where the judge is telling the world, if you commit these kinds of crimes, this is the punishment that you're going to get. And that's where I think Sean is going to get hurt.
So very interestingly, Agnifilo said, we'll waive the pre-sentence report from the probation department. We'll waive it. And the judge, not so fast. I'm sure he wants to hear their recommendation because that's the only neutral body.
And Laura, the defense wants to expedite the sentence
because they're hopeful that he'll be able to return home sooner to Star Island. I tell you, if I were the defense attorneys, I would be standing 10 toes down to talk about the fact that yes, the judge can consider all those different aspects of it, but the jury did not find compelling enough to actually convict on the elements of crime and violence. And so that's going to have to take into account here. Also, remember, and I know I'm not projecting, I'm not speculating here, I'm just reminding people. President Trump in his first term, he had a posthumous pardon on these similar counts in a very different context for a man, Mr. Johnson, very different world. But you're talking about somebody who has potentially the prerogative to act on something, and he has done so before. And in this instance, you can believe that based on what the defense already believes is an overcharge of that RICO, that they're going to suggest somehow that this is, if they were to appeal that, which they could now, they're going to suggest, hold on a second, this was a pretextual basis. You overcharged us, strategically trying to make sure he was the worst person in the world before this judge and everyone else, and that's why there was a conviction even on these charges as well. Successful? Likely not, but they're going to have to do the advocacy continuously up and through sentencing. They're going to have a remote hearing in the next week where the judge will hear them on having an earlier sentencing date. But you best believe any time he serves right now, right, Your Honor, can be credited to what he might ultimately get.
Sure, he's already served 10 months, so to speak, on his sentence. It all counts.
So that would be included.
Oh, absolutely, it counts. Yeah.
How long do you think it would be before Senate? What's an expedited sentence?
Well, right now it's October 3rd, but it would only be expedited if they waive that pre-sentence report. And I don't think the judge is going to go along with that. He wants to hear from them.
It's typically 4 months from the date of a conviction or a plea.
Why so long? I don't know.
Because the Department of Probation, I think, Judge, statutorily, the Department of Probation gets like 90 days, right? 90 days. So they get 3 months to put their little report together because it's pretty thorough. I mean, it's like 70 pages, 80 pages. No. It's not a lighthearted thing. In a case like today, they could go really deep on a case like this.
How would you factor in his? I mean, because one of the factors is recidivism, this fancy way of saying they might commit a crime again, and also remorse. Would you consider either of those things if Sean Diddy Combs did not demonstrate remorse for these particular charges as opposed to overall?
Not me. I would not, because there are a lot of reasons that the defendant isn't going to stand up and say, I'm sorry I did all this. There are a lot of reasons not to say that. Now, in his case, he has admitted through the lawyer to certain things, and he certainly can say he's sorry for that. But he has to be careful because the case will be appealed, no question, and he will seek bail again pending appeal.
And there's civil cases out there. To the judge's point, there's civil cases, and this will hurt him to some degree, but anything he says will be used against him in the civil cases to get more money.
Wow. Judge Shenlin, thank you very much. Arthur Aidala as well. Laura
Always
Coates,
a pleasure.
very much.